I don't want to get your channel doxxed or destroyed here, but I'll try and keep it as above board as possible. Basically, the company was trying to push for people to do things that I did not see was proper thing to do. If you want to take a medical procedure or do a certain thing, that is more power to you. If you think that that's right for you and your family, like I'm not one to prevent you or stop you from doing that. But the act of forcing your people, especially your employees, to do so, I was like vehemently against. So I was kind of raising my concerns regarding that. And I basically got a lot of pushback from senior leadership that like, nope, this is the path we're going forward. There will be repercussions if you do not comply with what we're asking.
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest cards on the entire planet. Available now.
We are grateful today to have another incredible guest, another playable character in this sea of non-playable characters. As you already know, in a world where there are so many of us, so many amazing people in this world, however, many of us don't think. We outsource our thinking, we're apathetic, we're indifferent, and this guest is anything but apathetic and indifferent. A brilliant, brilliant person, Chris Alaimo. He talks about his story of orange pilling, how his epiphany happened in shifting to a bright orange future, how he ended up at Bitcoin Magazine, and some exciting news that he has to share going forward, the next step in his journey. We talk about Unconfiscatable a little bit, Vegas, where we were just at together, and the relationships and networking that has formed because of these conferences, and really because of Bitcoin over the last few years, among many other things, the bond market, energy markets, cypherpunks, etc. There's so much that we talk about in this episode, trying to cram it in just about an hour. I hope you enjoy it. Chris Alaimo, enjoy. Mr. Chris Alaimo, thank you so much for joining me today. I really wish we could share some of the things we were just talking about, but we'll leave that for offline. So thanks for joining me today, brother.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
So tell me a little bit about your story. I was just telling you, I was talking to David Foley, kind of got his story, and I didn't know his story either. And similar to you, I've known you for a while, knew him for a while, but I never really knew your story, your Bitcoin story, kind of how this all came about, where you are now, what you're just explaining to me, your path just over the last few weeks, but in the last few months and years. How did this transition from young Chris growing up leading to where you are now with Bitcoin? How did this all transpire?
Yeah, I guess where do you want me to start? You want me to start at the beginning or
So that's a great point. So obviously, I helped do the marketing at Bitcoin Trading Cards, stuff like that. My big passion is children. So why don't you start like young, like even like what was your first experience with money, and like kind of what education did you have with money, and you can kind of bounce around there, but then leading up till now.
Yeah, so growing up, come from a two-family household. So, my mom stayed home. My dad, single company man, worked at the same company for like 35 years till he retired a few years ago. But yeah, I remember growing up, my dad always kind of, giving you wisdom about money, and he was very good about money. That's what made it work between my parents. Like my mom being able to stay home and him being a computer programmer definitely helps. It's definitely a sought after career, especially over the last 35 years. But he would always say things like, oh, like when you make money, save 10% to invest in the S&P 500, very basic stuff like, oh, you want to max out your 401k, your IRA. Like I kind of knew all those things growing up. And of course, any kid and their dad, they're like, nah, dad, like it's fine. Like I want to just use the money now. I'm a broke, 12-year-old, whatever it is from getting your allowance. But yeah, it kind of turned teaching you the importance of that. I guess maybe I wish he taught me the importance of tax. Like if he was like, gave me $5, but then took like half of it because he's like, hey, I'm pretending to be the federal government. I'm just going to confiscate half of this. But joking aside, yeah, he was just kind of teaching me about like the wisdom of money and obviously compounding interest. I think it's credited to Warren Buffett, or actually it might be Albert Einstein, like talks about the eighth wonder of the world being compound interest. And those who don't understand it, pay it. Those that understand it, make a fuck ton of money, basically. But that's just not really the root of, I know in Bitcoin circles, we talk about money being like, something that not many people know or understand. We see things as commodity monies or things that are used like money, like real estate, like bonds, like gold, like the stock market, the S&P 500. but it's not really ever getting to the root point or the root problem of things, which is money. So yeah, growing up, I was kind of always busy, an athlete, but always started working as soon as I could. I started as a lifeguard at like 15, and you make pretty good money hanging out in the summers. And then ultimately went into college. I like to believe myself, I have an aptitude for math and science. So, engineering was kind of a path that I always wanted to pursue. Went to medium-sized school in South Jersey and became a chemical engineer by degree. And then upon graduating, as you can imagine, chemical engineers make decent living. There's nothing to hide or lie. If you look up degrees that make a lot of money or high-paying salaries, that's one of them. And kind of went into the engineering field, kind of bounced around a couple different industries, and kind of was doing what I thought was the correct thing to do with money, which is like investing in the stock market, 401k, IRA, HSA. I could talk about that till the cows come home. But basically, and so I guess that kind of gets me into the education and into the working world. But I guess I've heard about Bitcoin, and many people say they've like heard about it in 3 points of their life or multiple touch points. I remember in 2010, 2011, my dad kind of coming into my room. He's like, "Hey, this guy like used this magic internet money and bought 2 pizzas with investor." So he was kind of like, should I buy any? And even if like I was like, nah, like it'll never catch on. Now, granted, this is 2010, 2011, very different from where we are as an industry now. But in hindsight, like even if I was super gung ho, like you should definitely do it, like definitely invest like $1,000, 10,000, whatever amount. He would be like, oh, let me think about it. But I know like him, he would just like say, I'll think about it, but then not do it. So I try not to lose sleep over how much money, like, our family's net worth would be if he invested just even $1,000 in it back in 2010. But then it's kind of one of those things you just forget about it, goes by the wayside.
Yep.
And then 2017, I heard about it again. And I definitely had more of the mainstream talking points of like, this kind of seems like tulip mania. You see it rise up and then crash, but I didn't really have the whole history of like what it went from in 2009 to present day, or at least back then in 2017. So I saw it crash and I felt very vindicated. I'm like, yep, I've been doing the right thing, investing in the S&P 500. This is a Ponzi scheme, tulip mania. I like, it's kind of one of those things that I don't know if it was JP Morgan or the founder of JP Morgan was basically like before the 1929 crash, he was like, yeah, the shoe shiner was telling him like what stocks to buy. And like, he basically timed the top within like 6 weeks by selling all of his shares.
That's right.
And, like basically was able to buy back in at a much lower price. So I had people that like, I knew, this is not to insult them, but people that never talked about money and investing were like, hey, like I'm definitely buying this thing. I was like, okay, like that definitely a good indicator. Like I didn't have a trade in the ring, but I'm like, if they're telling me this, then probably, we're going to see the other side of this. And that's what came to fruition. And basically, once again, kind of forgot about it for a few years. Now getting to the final story. I know this is a long-winded story.
No, it's perfect.
In 2020, I had been listening to Preston Pish's podcast, the Investors Podcast Network, just about general finance. And I always used to love their quarterly masterminds. It would be Preston, Stig, Tobias, Carlisle, and there's one other guy, Hari. I can't even pronounce his name. Hari is his name. And so each of them would always pick an equity or a bond or, a short that they were like looking at each quarter. And I'd been listening to the show for at least 3 or 4 years by this point. And every year they didn't, or every year that they did it, or every quarter that they did it, they would pick a different thing. So in March of 2020, Preston was like, he picked Bitcoin. I think Stig picked Google. Hari was like shorting Netflix. And I was kind of like respected each of them. I'm like, shorting's not my game. I already have a position in Google. I was like, interesting. Preston picked Bitcoin. Like, Preston, I really respect you. Like, kind of mentally talking to myself. I really respect his opinion, but like, that's not for me. And then in June of 2020, obviously, the world is going into chaos and everything in March and everything with the global pandemic. But Preston picked Bitcoin again in June of 2020. And I was like, all right, I really respect Preston. And in my 4 or 5 years of listening to the show, I've never heard them pick a stock in back-to-back quarters. I think Stig picked Google like 4 years prior, 5 years prior, but like enough time had passed that you're like, okay, it's not like a repeated pick. So that's really in June of 2020, I kind of started to go down the rabbit hole and be like, okay, I really respect Preston and his opinion. Why did he pick this twice in a row? Like something that's never happened on the show before. So ultimately got orange pilled by Preston Pish. And yeah, I kind of owe it to him that like go down the rabbit hole, bought it on Robinhood. That's a mistake, sold it because I couldn't withdraw it. And then you kind of start asking all the questions like, how does this work? How can they not inflate it? How can they not print more of it? Why are all these altcoins different than Bitcoin? And that kind of like led up to the journey.
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise because the algorithm hates truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
Excuse me. I love that. I try to start with everyone's story just because, I mean, not everyone has told their story, number one, but I think it's really important to tell the story because that's I was talking to a few people when we were in Vegas, and the origin story. I think Bitcoiners, in my opinion, we tend to do it's not just Bitcoiners, it's a lot of people. We tend to do a bad time. Anyone in sales, the best salespeople I've found are the ones that can tell their story, right? They listen, they ask questions, they listen, and they're able to move the person they're selling or persuading. They're able to move them emotionally, and get them into the same frame that they were in. And that's how I found, you look at Russell Brunson, some of the greatest marketers of all time, they're changing someone's context and bringing them to their emotional state, because the logic doesn't matter, like 21 million and it's decentralized. People are like, I don't care. Like, I do not care. Why are you talking about this? And I think that's why, like, everyone telling their story is super important, because that's what resonates with people. In other people will see this, over time, and be like, oh wow, like I had those same kind of things happen to me actually, like just like you were like the Preston thing, like, wow, he's saying it again, like these flags kind of going off, and like, ooh, like maybe I should look into that. I think that's why it's so radically important to be able to do that and keep telling the story, because like Robert Kiyosaki gets a lot of shit. He's one of my biggest mentors, and I've probably listened to like 1,000 hours of him, quite literally. And unless you like know someone really deep down, it's gonna, I understand his nuance. And so people are like, one of the things lately, right, this past week, like, oh, he's saying it's gonna crash again, it's gonna crash. I know what he's meaning. I know his nuance, and so but it's not everyone does. So I think that's why it's important to understand his success has really relied on storytelling. That's it. I mean, like, he doesn't teach like the how to. He's like, you can come like learn from anybody. Like, I'm the guy that's to shape move your context, to shift your context. Now you can be filled up with content, but you're going to go do the work. And I think those are the most powerful people, and that's why he's been so successful. In saying all that as well, me being long-winded, what's the best way you have found to orange pill people in your life or last handful of years? What's the best way you've kind of found that you've had the most success to do so?
Well, I think that's a great point. Like, definitely, like, the stories are kind of what sell people on ideas, on business ventures, on products, whatever it may be. Yeah, I've kind of learned a lot from Robert Kiyosaki as well. I've read many of his books and listened to him advocate for many things. Sorry, what was the question again? It was talking about
orange pilling.
how to
Yeah,
orange
like
pill
what's
people.
the best way you found?
Yeah, so what I find is like meet people where they are. So normally it depends on the person. Like, someone that learns better from reading might not learn better from a YouTube video, might not learn better from a podcast, might learn better from, you name it, writing out code, whatever it may be. So I think it's kind of meeting. First, you got to find the why. Like, if someone's like, hey, they like see it Bitcoin, or they see social injustice in the world, or you could talk about like Occupy Wall Street in 2011. Like, they were correct in their diagnosis of like, there's a problem here, and we think Wall Street's involved, but like they didn't get to the root cause that like money was the issue, and like how money and credit and debit and like all of these things are issued and perpetuated into our economy. So they were like close, but not 100%. Where Bitcoin is kind of a solution to that. So it's definitely kind of like, why is Bitcoin important to me? And by me, I'm referring to the person that you're trying to orange pill, not yourself, the person telling them. And then second is, well, how do they best take in information once I see that this, like, why I agree with why it's important? Like, how is the best way that I learn or take in information?
That's a great point. Really good, man. Need to bottle that up. So going back to your story, where does 2020 happens, and things are going because that's somewhat similar to mine. Mine was going down the gold and silver route 10, 15 years ago. I was a senior at Michigan State in '09 when that crash was happening. And so I'm leaving college, seeing that happen, realizing I was very political, realizing, oh, like you just said, oh, Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, they're two sides of the same coin. Like they're arguing in essence the same thing. Media told us that we were different, yada, yada, yada. And then finding Mike Maloney, Robert Kiyosaki in 2009, 10, 11, and just, basically being red pilled. And we're like, oh, geez, like this is completely fake. And then 2017, Bitcoin, after I heard it a few times and realizing, oh, wow, like I should really pay attention to this, waiting for it to go up and waiting for it to come back down, then started buying in 2018. But it didn't get me really until 2020 when I put everything together. Like you said, the lockdowns, right when the lockdowns happened, I was like, oh, yeah, this is not good. And had some shit coins, sold all my shit coins, converted them all to Bitcoin. I was like, no, this is the different game. I didn't think America would ever go this far. Here we are, and we're going there. And so that to me was, this last 3 years to me has been the process of, getting everyone on board. You end up at Bitcoin Mag at some point. Where's this journey from 2020 when Preston's Orange, when you're diving into books, I'm sure, and videos and all this stuff. Where does that process from 2020 go after that?
Yeah, so I was still in the engineering field in 2020. Was working at a company. I was in the kind of like an early career development program, so kind of like it was a future director track for kind of taking over a company, and medium sized company, about 5 to 6,000 people. And obviously, 2020 was very divisive. I'm speaking from experience, but I know many people have similar stories of getting in arguments with family and friends and loved ones and coworkers, and the list goes on. Basically, with everything that was going on in the world, everyone kind of saw that like their way of doing things was the correct way. And for better or worse, many families and friends were divided, unfortunately. I think many people didn't come out of that unscathed, whether it's they lost friends and loved ones to political strifes or to sickness or to whatever it may be. And I'm no different. So things were starting to, let's just say, change in my company. And they were really advocating. I don't want to get your channel doxed or destroyed here, but I'll try and keep it as above board as possible. Basically, the company was trying to push for people to do things that I did not see was proper thing to do. If you want to take a medical procedure or do a certain thing, that is more power to you. If you think that that's right for you and your family, like I'm not one to prevent you or stop you from doing that. But the act of forcing your people, especially your employees, to do so, I was like vehemently against. So I was kind of raising my concerns regarding that in the middle of 2021. And I basically got a lot of pushback from senior leadership that like, nope, this is the path we're going forward. There will be repercussions if you do not comply with what we're asking. So I kind of knew my time was limited in at least this company. So I started looking for new jobs, and over the next course of a couple months, fortunately, I was able to land a job at Bitcoin Magazine, and we'll forever be grateful to them and the team there, like CK, David Bailey, Pete Rizzo, Mike Germano. Like huge shout out to them for like taking me in. So tail end of 2021, I transitioned my career from an engineering career into working in Bitcoin full time. And that's kind of when I realized I was like, all right, like this is like freedom minded people. These are people that are trying to remove the state from money. And there are certain powers or privileges that come with this. Like when you get into Bitcoin, you could kind of tell people to go F off, and there's not much they can do. They can't shut down your bank accounts. They can't really shut down your social media platforms. I know this is kind of before Nostr really became a thing, but basically there's kind of a power that comes into like, hey, I'm going into Bitcoin, and there's not too much people can do to stop you. Granted, Bitcoin is fungible, but Bitcoiners are not. So you can get into the meat space, like governments or certain people can lock you down or harm you or hurt you. So I'm not saying that that's not the truth, but it does give you freedom to do a lot more when you have money that can't be confiscated. So ultimately, tail into 2021, I left my engineering career behind me, and I kind of haven't looked back. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey so far.
That's so cool. And so at Bitcoin Mag, what were you doing? You were, producing shows, the convention, like what was your role there?
Yeah, so it's kind of like trial by fire, like definitely in a nascent startup based industry. That's kind of where the Bitcoin industry I see right now is. And Bitcoin Magazine is no exception. I was hired as a Twitch project manager. So, the Twitch
Mm.
platform, video gaming and playing video games and kind of like educating about Bitcoin. I did that for all of basically 2 days. And then my role changed to multimedia producer. So I started and they're like, hey, we need to start a live show in 2 days. Like, how quickly can you spin this around? I'm like, oh, well, I've kind of done podcasts and I was going to stream for Twitch, but like, if you need me, I can, throw on my OBS hat and get this working. So basically trial by fire, like, can you do this in 2 days? We got it done in 2 days. Was it good? Absolutely not. I prefer if people don't watch the first episodes I was producing, but with time and repetition and doing it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week to 5 times a week, we were doing it, in the peak of it, like you get better at something that you do consistently every day. So, we had a really good show. And then, so that was kind of what I was doing. And I was helping with anything that was video based, basically coming out of Bitcoin Magazine. I was helping for the last 2 years.
That's cool. So you were with that. So I'm trying to think. That was the show with Q and P and Q,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
then
Yep.
they'd have like Nolan would come on with the breakup and stuff and all that, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So it had many different iterations. It started with Alex McShane and Q, and then Alex
Oh, that's
transitioned to
right.
another part in the company, and then it was Q, P, and myself, and then we'd have multiple
Yes,
guests, and we'd have Nolan, and we'd
that's
have
right.
like all these different people. So it was a blast. It was fun while it lasted for sure.
Man, yeah, yeah. Wow. Talk about a smart group as Bitcoiners, I guess, right? Just the level, the IQ level, I guess, is I know we all think it's 80 IQ, but holy cow, that's just cover, I think, for what's actually going on behind the scenes. So wink, wink. But what was your favorite part about working at Bitcoin Mag? I mean, obviously, it's one of the most known entities, I guess, out there in this space, no matter what side of the crypto world, I guess you're from, really. Everyone really kind of knows it or has some type of origin story about it. The conventions, obviously, massive, stuff like that. What was your favorite part about working there?
Yeah, so I think my favorite part working there is one. Well, I guess there's kind of multiple parts. One, I really like everyone at the company. We argue, we fight, we love, we're like family basically. And I know many people have strifes about any different thing, whether it's a new Bitcoin proposal that's getting put into place, or inscriptions, or ordinals, or coin joining, or whatever it may be. Like, we're kind of all in the trenches, and we're always fighting for what we think is the betterment of Bitcoin. Obviously, people can have conflicting views and differing ideas. That happens even at our company, but I really love, like, everyone at the company is kind of definitely pushing to what is best for Bitcoin. And we have a pretty good track record of like people that come into the company. It's that their mission is about Bitcoin. Then, like, putting on the conference is incredible. Definitely, I came in right before we had B22 or Bitcoin 2022, which we had over 26,000 people at a venue, which is just like
Wild.
the sheer size of it when
That's
you think
mind
about
blowing.
it. And we were a team even back then of sub 100. Obviously, we have many like
Wow.
contractors and
Mhm.
and consultants and people that are helping us put on the event. We don't put it on with just the 90 of us. We obviously have people that build the setup and the stage and kind of manage stuff. But when you're putting on something of that magnitude, it's there's a lot of trial by fire, and there's a lot of fires behind the scenes that people don't see. And if you're good at it, people don't realize all the issues that are occurring. But yeah, I mean, the event of that size was incredible. We were literally hit the record for biggest Bitcoin conference in the world, biggest
Yep.
crypto conference in the world. So we're even better than the altcoins
Jeez.
at it, and biggest finance conference in the world. I think like Money 2020 probably, or like that was like in February of 2020. I think it had like just about 20,000 people, but we had even more than that at our event. That's at least what we've seen through the records of attendance and stuff. And so yeah, I mean, it was an incredible event. Obviously B23 was smaller in scale. You know, we were in a bear market, but yeah, definitely seeing awesome Bitcoiners, hanging out with Bitcoiners, being at an event, learning about Bitcoin. There's nothing like it. I was able to have my hand at the news desk. So Marathon had like a news desk that they sponsored at the conference.
Yep.
So I was able to be on the back end of it or behind the scenes in 2022. And then I was able to assist in like being on the news desk actually at Bitcoin Amsterdam and Bitcoin 2023. So
So
yeah, it was a
cool.
blast, but really awesome event and love hanging out with Bitcoiners.
So cool. Do you any like crazy behind the scenes like stories that you can share at all, or anything like with any of the speakers or guests or political people that come or anything like that at all?
Yeah, I guess I'll keep it very broad because I
Yeah,
mean,
good,
just
good.
like we have like 5 different stages, and like you
Hmm.
know, everyone like the speakers, it's kind of like this means no disrespect to the speakers, they're brilliant, I love all of them, but it's like herding cats. It's like, hey, dude, hey,
Mm,
guy or gal, stand right here,
yes.
and then all of a sudden they're a famous Bitcoiner or someone that people want to hang out with, or they're
Yeah.
like, hey, dude, and they start hanging out and they dap
And
up
then they're
people,
gone.
they kind of wander, and you're like, we are on in literally 2 minutes, and like we are on a time scale, like we can't
Oh
just like,
man.
oh, like we're 2 minutes late. It's like, no, like we have to cut your talk down or we need to take away from someone else's talk. So it's kind of one of those things that it's like, you know, the controlled chaos of it all. It's like, and we're doing this on 5 different stages. The news desk counts as a 6th stage. So like, you know, we're just trying to keep people in the right thing and the
That's
logistics of it
amazing.
all. Yeah.
So funny. What's the biggest thing you learned, whether it was at the convention dealing with people or just at Bitcoin Mag, just or it could just be the last 3 years, I guess, really becoming Orange Pill. What was the biggest thing you kind of learned throughout the last 3 years?
Ooh, biggest thing I've learned throughout the last 3 years. I mean, I think that like my buddy Matt Odello says this. He's like, there's trade-offs to everything. And what I mean is like there's trade-offs in your Bitcoin setup. There's
Hmm.
trade-offs in the hardware wallet you use. There's trade-offs with the software wallet you use. There's trade-offs in the companies you work with. There's trade-offs in everything. And it's no one person like, you know, there's kind of the term like, oh, like I'm the best Bitcoiner, or like I'm the hardest Bitcoin maxi, or like, you
Yes.
know,
Perfect
it can come down
setup
to,
or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, oh, my perfect setup is 3 seed signers that I built myself that no one knows that I have, using Sparrow Wallet that I downloaded on Tor, that no, like I'm using someone
Oh
else's
man.
Wi-Fi that like, you know, the NSA can't track my transactions. Like that, like literally as hardcore as you can get, like that setup's not perfect for everyone. And there's trade-offs if you do more of like, oh, I'm going to do an Unchained, and like, oh, okay, maybe they have privacy into like seeing what coins I use. Like there's trade-offs to everything, and there's no perfect setup. And even if your setup's perfect today, doesn't mean it's going to be perfect tomorrow. So there's trade-offs to
That's
everything, basically.
that's so good. Is it Thomas Sowell or something like that, or Milton Friedman or somebody? I want to say it was Sowell, maybe that always. I think George Gammon always talks about that. Just nothing. There's no absolutes. Just only trade-offs. And I think that's such a great thing for all of us to remember. Really, really have to remember that. Where does so you're at Bitcoin Mag, and then we'll kind of start transitioning a little bit here. You're at Bitcoin Mag, and then you are, we talked about some other different things you have going on now. So I would love for you to kind of touch into what you have going on now. That's why I'm leaving it broad the way I'm asking it. That way you can kind of handle it the way you want to handle it. But what are things looking like for Chris Alaimo now? So Bitcoin Mag, and you've got some new things going on. Where does that all come into play?
Yeah, definitely. When's this going live by any chance? You know?
Probably in the next handful of days, probably,
Okay.
so it's, yeah, I could, whenever you need it to, just depending on what you need to say or not say, but yeah,
Yeah, can we schedule this for like early or
early
like
next week or something.
middle of next week would
Yeah,
probably be great.
perfect.
Yeah, so unfortunately I have left Bitcoin Magazine, so that's official and live today. It was a great 2-year run. You know, I have so much respect for so many people at the organization: Mark Goodwin, Joe Rogers, Nick Hoffman, David Bailey, Pete Rizzo. The list goes on and on. Mike Germano, and you know, so many great coworkers. It was just kind of a time that like I kind of felt like I was stagnating my career, and I kind of wanted to do something new and transition to growth. So I kind of have like 3 things going on right now. So yeah, I will be joining Swan early next week. So taking a little bit of a reprieve and a break, my first time of a break in the working world in like 9 years of being in the world. Normally I'd
Wow.
end on a Friday and start on a Monday. So really excited to just have a little bit of a break, get some things done around the house, and
That's
figure
got to
out
feel
things on
weird.
that end. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll be joining Swan as a program manager, so helping people schedule for shows, you know, kind of getting us more into the mainstream, and assisting with that. So really looking forward to joining Swan. I'm also on the board of directors of Proof of Workforce, so it's a nonprofit. It's It's not a 501c3. It's a 501d3, I believe. Dom's going to correct me on that. But basically, Proof of Workforce is founded by Dom Bay. Many people know and love him. He's an awesome dude. He's a firefighter, all around awesome Bitcoiner and funny man for sure. So basically, what the idea is, we're trying to orange pill unions or workers into understanding Bitcoin. So obviously, there's pensions. We see bonds as being something that, like, there's 26 trillion of like negative yielding or no, 26 billion of like negative yielding bonds. Like, that's just number, like, goes easily into Bitcoin. If it's like, this is a negative yielding bond, why the hell would you hold this? Like, it's better off to hold Bitcoin.
Is that just in America, in the United States, do you know, or is that globally?
That might be globally. It might be 26 trillion now that I'm thinking about it. That's like,
Yeah, it
26
might be.
billion doesn't sound that big, where 26 trillion I think sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's like negative yielding bonds across,
Wild.
G20 nations and all this. Like, why would you hold?
And that's nominally, isn't it? Or like
yeah,
Germany, I know there's actual negative yielding nominal bonds, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so there are bonds that, like, there's no way that you can because I think these were bonds that were bought when interest rates were negative. And then now that interest rates have jumped up to like 5, 6, 7, 8%, whatever it may be, depending on your country and everything, like, there's only way for them to become positive in real terms is they have to go further negative than they were when they were purchased. So if you were at 25 basis points negative or 50 basis points, you need to go to at least 75 basis points or 100 basis points. That also doesn't account for the time decay of like the last year and a half you've lost because the interest rates have gone up. So you need to account for like that lost year
That
of
compounding.
Like, yeah, exactly. So you need to be even further negative, and it's getting worse and worse every single day. So yeah, that's just kind of like seeing like that's like 26 trillion that should like easily go into Bitcoin. But yeah, we're
really quick. I'm gonna pause you really quick, and I've been meaning to ask this. I was gonna ask David Foley this, and I did not, but I'm really not asked anyone. Do you know anything? And we're the proof of workforce, and we'll go back to that in a second. But do you know anything? I heard there was a couple countries, speaking of the negative bonds, that they were, I was in Japan or Denmark. Got to ask like Anders or something like that. He might know. Denmark, that they were paying people to hold like mortgages. Like if you had 100 rental properties, they were paying people because it was negative yielding. You could take out that debt. It was mind blowing. I don't know. I've never really looked into it too much, but I heard, like you said, in 2020 and 2021, this was happening, and that like literally you were getting paid instead of you paying, the bank or whatever, the interest, you were getting paid the interest, which is absolutely mind blowing. Have you ever heard anything into that at all, or know anything about that?
Yeah, I think I heard something about it like 6, 7 months ago. So like, I'm not very familiar, but like I saw like basically their economy, they were trying to prop up their economy with debt. By doing so, you're incentivizing, and it wasn't a lot. It was like $47 for a mortgage that you take out, but that was paid out monthly, which is nice to get $47 per month. But yeah, they were basically incentivizing people to take out more mortgages to boost up their economy by propping it up by like, we need money, like we need to basically print money by making new mortgages into the economy. But yeah, that has like very perverse consequences, and it gets very out of hand. And then like the whole banking system's like even over leveraged more than they normally are. So yeah, it gets very, very hairy very quickly.
Unreal. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I that's fascinating. I'm sure there's not a lot of people that even heard of that. So that is how backwards we are. Anyway, the proof of workforce and how you're orange pilling.
So we've been assisting pensions or unions or workers just kind of learn about Bitcoin. Dom, his Santa Monica Fire Union was the first fire union to self-custody Bitcoin. So there's a lot of people on the tweet when we broke the news in June saying, oh, well, unions hold Bitcoin. That is true, but none of them self-custody. A lot of them were using it either through GBTC or they're using a registered custodian like
or using Celsius.
There's investments into crypto companies and pensions, but yeah, like they were the first ones to buy and hold their own Bitcoin on their own setup. So, and then now we've onboarded 2 more unions, so we're at 3 grand total. It's kind of like graduated and suddenly. So we had one in June, then we did another one I think in like October, November, and then we did another one more recently within the last 2 to 3 weeks. So it's kind of one of those things. And Dom explains this much better than I, but basically behind every union, whether you think it's Santa Monica or a New York Fire Pension or CalPERS, which is California, like there's people behind that number. It's like everyone just assumes CalPERS is one pension. It's like, no, there's literally like millions of people in the California pension plan system that it's like, if you're doing something that's benefiting them, it's like, that's like millions of people that vote or sway in that way. Like imagine, I know there's this great thing. I think it's either from Swan, the Nakamoto portfolio, or Preston has brought this up before. If you held 1% Bitcoin and 99% cash. And in 2020, granted, with all the fucking money printing that went on, that occurred in those last 3 years, or almost 4 years, even if you hold 1% cash or 1% Bitcoin and 99% cash, and the cash is devalued by like printing, what is it, 40-50% of the dollars in existence have been created in the last 3 to 4 years, you've still outperformed the S&P 500 by like 1.5 percentage points, and you decreased your volatility by half. So like, it's insane when you think about that. That's 1%, and then you held the rest cash, and you outperform the S&P 500. There's like not too much things that you can add 1% to a portfolio and increase your returns and decrease your volatility. That's like absurd. So it's one of those things that Dom always brings up, like the Santa Monica fire pension. That's like 150 people on that people. And then it's like, we had another union of about 250, another people that's like 200. So when Elizabeth Warren or AOC or all these random politicians are like attacking Bitcoin, saying like, hey, only money launderers and criminals use this, like that's a way that can sway votes that are like, hey, like my portfolio is up, and I just added a 1% allocation. We have 39% bonds and 60% stocks, and the stocks and bonds are both getting destroyed. And the Bitcoin is the only thing keeping me in the green, or at least net neutral compared to the market. Like, Elizabeth Warren and all her and her peers are going to think differently before going after Bitcoin. And I know we're kind of like in the then you fight you stage with definitely many politicians, going after Bitcoin and crypto in general. And I definitely think that this is going to be something that like oranges pills us, and it's kind of like a thing for the future for sure.
Do you, and you brought up some great points here. What do you think? I was gonna ask you something else, but first I'm gonna go to Elizabeth Warren, because you just touched on that. Obviously been big in the news lately. We were in Vegas last week together, obviously, and there was some stuff breaking there. But do you think, in your opinion, do you think it's an adoption thing where they're trying to slow down adoption so they can get theirs, she can get her, the banks can get theirs, that type of thing? Or do you think it's more of a malicious thing where they're like, no, we absolutely don't want this? Which way do you think things are going here and trending? Because obviously people have thoughts all over the spectrum here and what they think it is. And you have the red pill, like you have like, oh, the government's out to get us and they whatever, which, hey, could be true. But then it's also like, I look at the 90s, and you had the very same thing happen where the retail was in the tech stocks, really was front running a lot of the higher ups. And then what do you know, the crashes and this and that, Y2K, and all of a sudden, the little guy's out, the big guys come in, and then like, oh, now the retail come back in. So what are your thoughts on which way, what Warren's doing and what's all going on here with us?
Yeah, no, I think it's a mix of both. I mean, if I'm thinking of it strictly from a political lens, I definitely think they are trying to hamper, or they're trying to pigeonhole people into the old system. They're the beneficiaries of the current system. They have the Cantillon effect. They're protected by investor protection laws that they're allowed to invest on insider information, and you and I are not, Brandon. So like, I definitely think it's that. But at the same time, like if you look at the incentives, like I'll call it how I see it. Politicians are bought in this day and age, whether you're red, blue, or somewhere in between. Like there is private interest that it's very easy to buy a politician, either with lobbying, with, making sure that, hey, we'll give you money and not your political opponent. They may be saying that, but they're probably doing both, but they kind of get favors from both sides of the industry. But yeah, I definitely think she is trying to keep people in the old system because she's the biggest beneficiary of it. At the same time, the private institutions are like, hey, we want to push out retail or make things more difficult or scare people so we can get a better entry point. So I think it's kind of like a little bit of both. Whether the politicians themselves are taking place remains to be seen. I think they are not as smart as they claim to be. So I do think that there's like perverse incentives like, hey, if you push them out, whether you buy Bitcoin or not, we'll put you on the board of Coinbase or JP Morgan. If you don't think Elizabeth Warren were to leave like Congress or Senate today, like you don't think she's going to be on the board of like all these fucking big banks or big pharma or like you name it, any industry, she can go in, be on the board, collect $250,000, show up to 4 board meetings a day, probably on Zoom from her nice like fucking mansion in fucking Cape Cod, and like it's no big fucking deal. I wish I had that set up. Yeah, that's sweet. But like at the end of the day, it's nefarious, and she's taking advantage of like her constituents and people of the United States and ultimately the world. Like, let's be honest, like with the US still being the global reserve currency, they're the beneficiary, like the global cantillionaires, not just like the richest guy in name whatever country.
Man, tell us how you really feel, Chris. I would love it. So I was watching a true Bitcoiner's favorite person. I was watching Anthony Popliano on it was one of the it was like scrolling through YouTube and I saw one of his segments on, CNBC or something like that in the last like day or so, or whatever it was. I thought he made a good point though. He was talking about, I mean, regardless of what people think about, I guess he is a sharp dude. But he was saying that, Jamie Dimon, he made a great point about Jamie Dimon. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but, Jamie Dimon's out here again, saying, oh, I'd get rid of crypto and stuff like that. And, but we know in the background, he's got, how many people working on, whatever, Bitcoin, crypto trading desk in Chase. It's been going on for like 5 years, 6 years. He's been, outwardly saying, I hate it. This is ridiculous. He goes to the WEF, he goes wherever, and he's saying it everywhere he can. He's going to Congress, he's going on media. But in the background, for the last like 6 years, kind of to what you were just alluding to, what we were just talking about, is they're over here like, doing one thing, but or saying one thing and doing another thing. And it just feels like, are you trying to get in under the little guy and not be front run by the little guy again? It just, I'd love to get your thoughts on Jamie Dimon as well, since we're in the Elizabeth Warren vein, on kind of what your thoughts are and what you see there.
Yeah, it's like watch what they do, not what they say. I
Yeah.
definitely think like it's multiples of things. Like he's a guy that always said, like 2017, he said if I find out any of my analysts are buying Bitcoin, like they will be like fired basically. And this was just 6 years ago. To nowadays, like if you don't think he's gonna be one of the first ones, or J.P. Morgan Chase is gonna be one of the first ones to, I forget if they listed in Bitcoin ETF. If not, they're definitely buying it for them and their clients for sure. And then, trying to get in at a lower price. It's funny. He always says it's blockchain, not Bitcoin. He said that over the summer. I definitely think like when he says that, because he knows like if they force someone into a blockchain, not Bitcoin, they kind of have like CBDC like powers. Not that they don't already have that nowadays. People are terrified of CBDCs, which I do agree they're scary. But like at the end of the day, Brandon, if they wanted to debank us, they could do that tomorrow. Like my bank accounts would be closed. Luckily, you and I have Bitcoin, hopefully in cold storage. Hopefully it's not swept or anything like that. Like, but it does make things more difficult. Imagine not being able to use Uber, not being able to book a flight because your credit cards don't work. Imagine not being able to pay your mortgage, that you have a mortgage at the bank, but your bank accounts are closed. So how do you pay the mortgage? And they basically try and evict you. Like things would get very like, while I love Bitcoin, and I do think that this is like in hyper Bitcoinization or the future we're going to, like we'll be good. Like right now, if I were to get debanked, like I would be kind of royally fucked. Like I'd be able to make it work, but like things would not be easy to say the least, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think this is a great point. I would love you to elaborate even more on this. You mentioned the CBDCs, the FinCEN stuff, the Warren, what she's been doing even past the FinCEN stuff in a way, trying to expand the Patriot Act and all that. How bad do you think things get in the macro? Bitcoin wins, right? The gerontocracy goes away. The younger generations, they're going to come, they're going to do what they're going to do. But what do you see like this decade? I mean, what is Chris's outlook, I guess, just for the next handful of years? Like what is this? We're trying to cross this rickety bridge. I always think of like Jurassic Park 3 when they're in the pterodactyl cage and you always have like the movie or whatever, you're in the rickety bridge and everyone's trying to cross one by one. And I feel like that's where we are, where we're trying to get across one by one. Everyone's trying to get to the other side of hyper Bitcoinization or going from scarcity to to abundance. Where do you think we are in this stage, I guess? But also, I mean, we talked about then they fight you stage, but what do you see, I guess, playing out here in the next few years where they could make it, like you said, we could have cold storage, Bitcoin and cold storage. I know many of us do, but they can still make your life, like you said, a living hell. They can, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't fly anywhere. They can still do things like that. I think that's what people have to start grasping. I think Bitcoiners do.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start with Clown World has no peak. Like the amount, Clown World doesn't have a peak because they can print unlimited amount of fiat currency. So I'll start with that. So I do think like while things were I'll speak from experience. Things were bad in 2020, 2021. Definitely started like things were bad in 2022 when the market was crashing out, or at least the Bitcoin and crypto markets were crashing because of all the fraudulent stuff at SBF, Celsius, BlockFi, you name it. But I do think like it looks like things are on the trend upwards, but at the same time, it's like, is this kind of like that fake bull trap where it's kind of goes up and then comes down? I do think like they do feel, and by they, I mean like politicians and private interests, the bankers and BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan Chase, you name it, and the politicians like senators like Elizabeth Warren, like they do feel like they are kind of losing not the plot, but like kind of losing the glue is falling off and keeping the car together. So I do think, I hate politics. I despise it. But with that being said, like obviously 2024 is an election year. I do think things are going to be very weird. I think the Democrats and Republicans, not that I'm in either camp, but they have different issues. So obviously Trump is kind of the front runner for the Republicans. I think there's a few scenarios, and I see like I'll run through each of them. So scenario one is kind of like Biden, sucks it up, and like I really think he should retire. Like this is not me bashing on him. Like we can obviously see his mental health and his health is deteriorating over the last 4 years. Whether you love the guy, hate the guy, or somewhere in between, like I think it is kind of unfair what the Democratic Party, his wife, like I really do think hold his wife responsible for being like, dude, like dude's fucking.
She is a doctor, right? I mean,
yeah, he's 83
right?
years old. Like, shouldn't you just chill with your family? Like, sail off into the sunset. You're a career politician, made more than enough money. Like what's the point of propping this dude up like a sock puppet? Like, I think it's like
Weekend at
really sick
Bernie's.
what he's doing.
Yeah,
yeah, literally. And so that puts them in an interesting spot. Does he step down or does he run again? Obviously, it looks like he's going to run again. But God willing, something doesn't happen to his health. And then do they put Kamala Harris up? Do they do Gavin Newsom? Like what's their pivot? Like, I think Gavin Newsom makes the most sense. I know many people hate him. I won't comment on that. Not the biggest fan of him.
But you're talking from a health perspective, right? Just a human health perspective. Like what? Yeah, exactly.
Then you kind of have like, I wouldn't say like left of center or like more independent. I definitely say RFK Jr. appeals to definitely like more the liberals or left of center people, but now he's kind of independent because he was kind of getting squashed by his own party. And so it's like he's definitely going to steal votes from their side. And I do think even he'll steal like moderate votes that are on the right. So it's like, okay, so you've got RFK. Do I think he has a shot at winning? Not really. Do I like Biden is obviously probably the front running candidate for the Democrats unless they swap someone out. And then Republicans, like DeSantis is definitely disappointed. Vivek is like, well, I like the guy and I think he says good things. I don't think he's a step up from Trump. And I do think like there's like Trump gets in. So, or Trump potentially gets in. If Trump gets in, there's kind of like two scenarios. He either gets in and it's like the left calls it fraudulent election and it's fine. Option two is he's in jail and then gets elected. And then there's like potentially a civil war. I'm not even joking. Like there's a weird chance that he gets like he is like in jail or thrown in jail, like right before the election, September, October, even November timeframe of 2024, or even before he can take office in January of 2025. And then it's like, I really think like, hate to be a doomer and gloomer, but if that occurs, there's a real off chance that like things go sideways in the US, like internally. And obviously
which they want. I think they want that, right?
And it's kind of like we're seeing this as like kind of end to empires. I know Ray Dalio's talked about this, like the fourth turning. Mark Moss has talked about this, but we're spread thin already. Like obviously we have low levels of people enlisting to the military. We have many people that were kicked out or left because of things that were happening in 2021, 2022. We're fighting kind of basically a proxy war in Ukraine, Russia. We're fighting a proxy war in Israel and Gaza. Obviously, people are split between the Palestinians and Israel, even in the United States. Democrats seem to be more on the Ukrainian side. Republicans, I wouldn't necessarily are the Russian side, but they're like, we shouldn't be sending money there. And then obviously if China is probably our biggest threat and they're like encroaching on Taiwan. So it's like we're facing fractures from our manufacturing standpoint. The semiconductors, which basically run the world, our computers, these webcams, like anything you name it, cell phones, whatever, like that's like we're trying to build here, but we can't get it planned up in the next 10 years. Ukraine, Russia proxy war, Israel, Palestinian conflict. Our politicians are like at each other's throats. Like the list goes on and on. Like if there's any time to say that things are kind of fracturing the US, it's now. Obviously, when people say this, it's like, I hope that there's a better future, but I do think things like we're somewhere between weak men and hard times. And I don't know if it's like we're going from hard times to strong men or if we're going from hard men to even harder times. So I don't know. Man. That's a long-winded rant on the whole political and
where are
economic
we? Yes. Boy, that is a great answer for the question of where are we on the rickety bridge and how bad can things get? Well, there you have it. So it's funny because I think we get along. Like we were talking in Vegas and stuff like that, and we haven't got a ton of time to sit down. But like you can just tell sometimes people you vibe with and stuff like that. It's just energy people put off, right? And all the things you say are the things that last 20 years of my life, literally since 8th grade, since 2000, I've just been very passionate about politics and then sound money. Like, hey, this is a uniparty. Like just seeing all these things. And it was very political in the 2000s when I was young, literally fighting with teachers, arguing with family members as a teenager and as a college student. Where do you where did this passion for all these things? I mean, you have such a breadth of knowledge. What do you study to kind of stay on top of everything? Because there's a lot of people, they just kind of focus in on one thing. Like, hey, I'm a politics guy. Hey, I'm the energy guy. I'm a miner. Hey, I'm a macro guy. You have a broad knowledge of a lot of different things. Like, what was that? How have you stayed up to date? I guess for years now, because that's obviously a part of you and who you are. Like, what are you studying usually to do that? Like, is there something that you're like, no, I do focus more on this, but I kind of like to dabble in other things, or how does that kind of come all about?
Yeah, so I mean, Twitter is obviously a cesspool of information for better or worse. Yeah, like I don't know, I stay up to date with it with like just kind of watching various YouTube videos. Like I'm kind of like a night owl kind of guy. Like my fiance goes to bed, early, and then I basically
Mhm.
like that's when like the real work begins. Like I do 4 to 5 hours of work of just like watching shit, listening to stuff, podcasts. Granted, not every night, you hang out with your friends or
Right.
do different things, but yeah, for the most part, like whether it's watching on Twitter, listening to podcasts. Like I like when I drive, places, listen to podcasts
Yeah.
and kind of like turn my car into like an educational experience or something like that. I definitely do try and bounce back and forth between different sides of the aisle. I kind of became disillusioned with politics in 2016, obviously very contentious between Clinton and Trump. I actually didn't vote for either. That was more not saying
Hmm.
which one I didn't like better, but it was just to prove a
Yep.
point. Like I was kind of
Yep.
getting harassed at work and I was a young
I knew
engineer
a lot.
and
Yep.
even prior to my previous job that I explained, but basically like the plant or the facility I was at was kind of a pretty 50-50 split. Living in New Jersey, so definitely more of a blue state, but a lot of
Hmm.
the engineers or old time guys at the plant were more conservative. So it was definitely a divide. And like I had people coming up into my office asking how I was going to vote, which I think is a crime. Like I don't even
Wow.
think you're allowed to like ask people how they're voting or like what they're going to vote. But like people were getting so mad. Like I'd be like, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. And they're like, well, any vote for that, like for this person is a vote for the other person. And then I finally came to the conclusion. I'm
Wow.
like, all right, I'm throwing my name. Like, I don't want to be involved in this at all. I said I'm voting third party. And that enraged people even more. Like you would think if I
Oh
said I
boy.
was going to vote left or red or blue, it'd be like, oh, they're even more mad. No, they were even more mad about, third party. I debated not even voting. And they're like, well, that's throwing away a vote. You can't bitch if anything happens. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to vote third party and I'm going to bitch about everything that happens. So that's kind of the way that I've.
That's amazing. What are there certain things like is like I was asking David Fuller earlier, and he's like same thing, like YouTube. It's a common theme, I guess, and he was like, yeah, YouTube is like one of the greatest learning tools there is. And you think of like there's a whole nother topic for a different day, but just compulsory education, government run schooling, and how backwards and how outdated all that is. And you have like YouTube, you can watch MIT lectures, you can watch anything you want, you can watch on YouTube or online somewhere. And is there anything specifically? Is it like, hey, I'm on Lynn's newsletter, or I'm reading Lavish's, The Informationist, or books I've read, Safety's book, or is it like YouTube stuff like that you're generally kind of pouring into, or is it books? Or yeah, okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can expand on that. Like, so obviously there's like a gambit of podcasts I listen to. So I try and listen to Preston's podcast, Preston Pish's podcast every
mhm.
week, his Wednesday episode, the Blue Collar Bitcoin guys, Dan and Josh, I love. And then I listen to the more technical ones. So like normally I listen to Every Citadel Dispatch. I listen to Rabbit Hole Recap every week with Matt Odell and Marty Bent. And then who else? What's the other one? Oh, Bitcoin.review with NBK's podcast is more of a
Mm,
technical one. Then on Twitter, Adam Meister told me this, and he was actually at Unconfiscatable.
yeah.
He said something fascinating, and this was years ago. He told me this. He's like, Twitter, everyone uses as a social media site. He's like, they should use it as a web browser. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean by that? He's like, don't let Twitter, whether it's Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, or whatever, like give you the curated information that's meant for you. He's like, I go to Preston Pish's Twitter handle and I look at his tweets and what he's responded. I go to James Lavish's and I look what they respond. I go to John Carvalho of Synonym and I look what he said. Like
Hmm.
he like goes at individual people's to see kind of like, I go to core developers, what Luke Dasher's saying. I go to like the macro guys. I go to this. And I thought that was like a profound thing. He's like, don't let Twitter be what you see, like see what you want to see for yourself. And that's based on the people that you follow and like how you curate your content. So Adam Meister, shout out to him for saying that. So obviously I follow
Great
a lot of
tip.
people on Twitter and I've definitely curated my experience to like, I can get the information that I want or I'm seeking out pretty quickly. Obviously you get trickles in from, Elizabeth Warren saying her shit or, whatever
Right.
other industry. And then I agree, like YouTube's probably like the most important thing of our time right now. Obviously there's issues with it being, run by Google, bought by Google, but like, obviously like BTC Sessions is probably one of the best, it is the best place to find out anything you want to learn about using Bitcoin, how to interoperably with Lightning, Bitcoin wallets, desktop wallets, running a node, whatever it is for your Bitcoin side of things. But even just like anything on there, like anything from Bitcoin Magazine, from Swan, obviously. Yeah, there's just so much that you can learn, and there's so much vast information. And then, after I break out of the Bitcoin echo chamber, if I have spare time in my week, obviously I like watching Patrick Bet-David's one of the best interviewers in the game. Rogan, I only really watch like specific episodes, and I normally try and watch his on either someone that I really love or someone that's controversial. So like when he had Bernie Sanders on, I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, but I really enjoyed it. He had a great conversation with a professor that's a communist that like advocates for socialism and communism.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's actually a really good conversation. And then, like Russell Brand here and there on Rumble, he gives like the comedic look, and then, just kind of dabble in all other things from here and there. But yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of it. I know it's a lot of information to take in. I take in like
huge.
maybe a percentage or 5% of what I take in, but by repetition.
Yep. Well, it's a common theme, obviously, among Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners always have a treasure trove of information and things they're watching and things they're reading, and that's the common thing. It's always like you always hear the saying, or I don't know who it was, Bob Proctor years ago, personal development side, and it was like, yeah, you go into a poor person's house and what do you see? You see an Xbox and 5 TVs or whatever, and right when you walk in or whatever it is, and then you go to a wealthy person's house and what do you see? You walk in, there's a library, and it's a very is just as a pattern, and Bitcoiners just have this like litany of like, oh, I'm reading this, I'm watching this, I'm studying this. And it's just, you can't not acknowledge that pattern, obviously. And I think for people coming into space, it's huge. That's why I love that you rattled off a bunch of them, because not everyone's going to grab on to 90% of that. But if they hear one or two people, they keep hearing, like we talked about earlier, keep seeing those patterns or those things kind of keep coming up, like, ooh, maybe I should like check that person out because I keep hearing that everywhere, that same person or that same pod or whatever it is. So thank you for sharing that. What do you consider yourself? I know you say you're a numbers guy, engineer, stuff like that, but do you think of yourself more as a macro guy? I mean, you're well versed, breadth of knowledge, but do you think of yourself more of like, hey, what's your passion in this space within the Bitcoin ecosystem? Is it like the technical stuff? Is it the energy, the mining, the macro political side? Like, what is the side that Chris likes the most?
Yeah, so I actually being an engineer and math and numbers guy, like I actually like how Bitcoin operates. Like I know that's very broad, but like, the idea of private key, public key pairing. So more of like the cypherpunk ethos, like using the technology, Nunchuck wallet, Sparrow wallet, Spectre wallet, Phoenix, Breeze, Mutiny, you name it. Like I definitely like the technical aspects. I would like to get more versed in mining, but I had an energy background previously at my previous job. So I was working in the energy sector. We were doing waste to energy, but yeah, macro, I like to hear the smarter minds than I say what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, I treat it kind of like astrology for guys. Like, you could say they can't do this, they can't do that. This is going to happen. This is going to do that. I think Matt Odell's line of stay humble, stack sats is probably like that. That's the advice and shit I live by. And it's worked out pretty well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, like maybe it can help you position yourself to have a little bit more cash versus a little bit more Bitcoin. But, I kind of live my life stack sats, have a little bit of an emergency fund in case some, God forbid, happens to me. But yeah, no, I like the technical side and using Bitcoin. I do think that that's like one of the things that's the hardest thing to do. And people get very confused. And Bitcoin, like any technology, nascent technology, especially that's free and open source, like we definitely have a naming issue. We have like, I wouldn't say a usage issue, but it's like people are like, oh, is this wallet on chain or Lightning? Like they shouldn't even worry about that or know about that. What's a UTXO? What's a coin join? What's a, coin control? Like there's many things that like I'm down the weeds and I love talking about, but I realize at the end of the day, like 99% of people either don't want to know about it. Two, they find it a hurdle that they like get scared and don't want to get into. And like, or it's just like something that deters them from using Bitcoin. So I do think we have a long way to go, but at the end of the day, like I'm more than happy to help anyone with their setup or learn about it, or, any questions they have. Like that's kind of where I see myself as in my role in Bitcoin for sure.
I love that. Yeah, you touched on something, and again, even David Foley, we were talking about this earlier again, and he's in that side of things, the macro and helping manage, people's assets and stuff of that nature. But, he's even, just kind of laughing, like we're gonna look back and like, why were we listening to Jerome Powell and Janet? Why were we like trying to figure, the tea leaves and like what's gonna happen? I just like laugh and like you said, it gets a lot of the play, obviously, listening to the macro and the guys in the space or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, this stuff's not going to exist in like 10 years, guys. Like, why are we even talking about it? It's like you do have that at times where like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we not talking about the technical stuff more or whatever, talking about our origin story and trying to orange pill more people? Like, macro is going to be gone in a sense, in a
Yeah.
decade from now. So I love that you say that. What, since the technical side is something that you're passionate about, what, would you suggest somebody, and again, a beginner person is not going to necessarily be getting into this right away, but maybe something that's like medium to advanced into Bitcoin. There's still a lot of people obviously that don't run nodes and things of that nature. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's thinking of like, hey, I want to be self-sovereign, I want to get to the next step? What are some of your favorite, things to kind of, maybe study in that space or go into if you're looking for stuff to get answers, but also a setup maybe, and you don't have to go in great detail with it necessarily, but when someone is going down that road of thinking like, hey, what should I be doing here? I want to kind of take this next level, whether it's the Blockstream satellite or getting a node or a lightning node. Like, what are some of those steps people should be kind of looking at to really be getting out of the system?
Yeah, so I guess first things first, I'll start with if you've bought Bitcoin, you're half the way there, but to get the full step and to actually complete your journey, you need to self-custody. So whether, the first step, whether you're going to use a mobile wallet like Nunchuck wallet or Mutiny or Breeze or Phoenix, like buying Bitcoin and then getting into self-custody is your first step. Obviously I prefer to do things with non-KYC sats. So like getting something from like BISC or Azteco or, peer-to-peer trading. You're at your Bitcoin meetup, you give them cash, they send you Bitcoin. Like that's my preferred method. But, after you acquire Bitcoin, you self-custody it. That's the first step. Then kind of like leveling up, like instead of using a mobile wallet like Mutiny or Phoenix or Breeze or something like that, learning how to get a hardware wallet, like whether you build a seed signer or foundation devices or cold card, and kind of setting that up with a desktop wallet, whether that's Sparrow's my favorite or Spectre. And then like after you do, okay, now I send it off an exchange to my hot wallet, maybe sending that to your cold storage wallet on Sparrow with your cold card or whatever it may be. And then maybe after that, even leveling up a step further and like doing multi-sig. So you're like, oh, maybe you have Seed Signer Foundation, Cold Card, Jade, and a Trezor, and you like have a 3 of 5 multi-sig and kind of like connecting them all to Sparrow and then kind of like geographically distributing them and kind of knowing the importance of that, like backing it up on, paper or even better on a seed plate on metal. So I definitely think like kind of getting to multi-sig, 2 of 3 or 3 of 5 are probably the things that I'd recommend for the layperson. Like that's probably the next thing. And then the last and final thing is kind of like utilizing Bitcoin. So after you've got your setup all locked down, you feel really secure, you feel confident, you can wipe it, restore your wallet. I recommend people get so freaked out. They're like, oh, like this is a lot of Bitcoin or it's a lot of my net worth. It's like, dude, use $5, use $10. Like you don't have to, use it all at once. Or you don't have to use a crazy amount of it. And then like, if you lost $5, are you pissed? Yeah, you're probably annoyed, but you're not like, I lost my life savings. If you use
Mhm.
5, 10, $20, like that, yeah, that sucks, but count that as the cost of education. Like, would you rather spend $20 learning about Bitcoin, or would you rather spend 70K at Harvard right now to getting a degree there? So, that's kind of like the
Yeah.
trade-off. So I'd say like learn about how to use Bitcoin, and then ultimately that kind of goes into coin joining, that learns into pay joins, that learns into coin control, that learns segregating like KYC sats if you have them versus non KYC sats. So I'd say like everyone has another step in the journey that they can do. I love that you brought up the Blockstream mesh satellite or
Mhm.
satellite. Like that's always like a further step that like even I can do. You can learn
Yeah.
about mining
I
and
have it,
things
but
like
it's not
that.
set up. So I'm not even there
Yeah,
yet. I have had it for like a year and a half.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh,
there's always another step that you can do to get your setup better. But yeah, no, I'd say definitely like I said, buy Bitcoin first, take it into self custody. Maybe get into a cold wallet, then get it into multi sig. Like there's kind of like there's levels to this, and you're kind of always trying to get to the next level.
so cool. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that too, because it's something that probably doesn't get touched on enough. Just everyone says obviously, cold, getting out your keys, not your coin, stuff like that. But just kind of breaking down those layers in a way that I think that's really important for people to kind of
Yeah,
see there is a hierarchy, a
yeah,
structure.
and like I said, BTC Sessions has the best videos in the space. He can help you with any of the setups. If you're nervous, even just watching the video, he does consulting as well. Like he'll do a one-on-one Zoom call to help your setup. Yeah, I think he's incredible what he does, and I think he's like invaluable to the space. Like just the
So
wealth of
true.
knowledge that he has.
Yeah, it's so true. And on that note too, I mean, and I was going to touch, in wrapping here, I know it's been about an hour. I want to be cognizant of your time. Simply Bitcoin. I know I wanted to kind of get your story, I guess, of how you kind of became friends with those guys and kind of some of the things I know, like you said, you're working at Swan, and what's going on there, but just the conferences. But that's, I don't even know what I was going to say now. I forgot what I was going to say, but so we'll kind of transition this so we can wrap here in a minute. But what simply kind of what's going on there, helping produce stuff. Obviously the show's growing. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. But everyone, doing more content. I guess that was the big thing. Overwhelming system, BTC sessions, what Ben is doing there is phenomenal. But we need 100 bends, we need 1,000 bends, we need so much more. And I think we sometimes, I don't know if we rest on our laurels as a community. You can rest on your laurels too, in a way where it's like, okay, we've got Ben, like, well, what if Ben goes away? Like, what if something happens? What if something happens in Ben's life? What if, whatever? What if Ben's gone? They censor him. Like, we need to overwhelm the system. This is something near and dear to my heart. We talked about the kind of the game theory, thinking adversarially, and just how crazy can the government get. But we need to overwhelm the system, and with positivity and Bitcoiners. And so the things you're doing and you were doing at Bitcoin Mag, things with Simply, the boys there, things at Swan, I mean, just on and on and on, just doing this, more and more people are doing podcasts. I know like Walker is always like, not another Bitcoin podcast, right? People say that, but we just need different stuff. We need different Bitcoin. I love, do you know, the guy, I can't even think of his name, Barstool Sports, the Sunday Conversation, Caleb Presley. Have you
Yes.
seen any of his stuff? Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
So funny.
the Sunday specials or the Sunday
Yes.
interviews. Oh yeah.
It's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I know like Tatum, is kind of in that vein, but who else? Like, and part of me has kind of been like, man, I should do stuff like that, or like we need more people doing stuff like that. Like just funny stuff, relatable, getting out to the masses. And because like that's genius. Like that's absolutely genius. And you got to have a talent for it for sure. But that to me is like, what you're doing. Again, you have a breadth of knowledge, but helping in that space of content, getting people on shows, I think is so massive because we have to overwhelm the system somehow. So now I'm being long-winded, but so that you can touch on the Simply stuff and kind of your relationship with those boys there, and content creators themselves, because you have a good background in this. But also, we talked about conferences, but I want to see not what your favorite conference is, but what your favorite kind of conferences. Do you like the huge stuff where people are networking and building community, all with this vein of content creation and then building community, which is huge in real life and in digital? But are your favorite ones like Vegas, where we were just at, where it's 200, 300, 400 people, or the massive ones? Where do you think you see the most benefit?
Yeah, so no, I agree. I think Tatum's hilarious, and I wish I was naturally as funny as he is. Like I know
You know?
his videos are like hyper edited, but like even in person, he is really fucking
He is
funny.
funny. Yes.
Yeah, but I agree. Like I definitely think we need more like comedic podcasts. Like we need more of everything. We need more bends. I have seen more people doing like tutorial videos on Bitcoin. I'm drawing a blank on their names right now, but I know that they've been putting out content on YouTube of just like Bitcoin tutorial stuff that's like really good. Man, I feel bad. I'll ping you after the show to like put their stuff in the show notes
Yeah.
besides Ben's. But yeah, no, I guess my favorite conferences, and this is kind of cliche, it's like the ones that I'm not working, because while I do love going, when you're working,
That's
it's
a
like
great
different
answer.
beast. Like
Yeah.
I love being there. It's like I was truly honored putting on B22, B23, and Bitcoin
Mhm.
Amsterdam. Like it's like Bitcoin Magazine and the conference team, we don't take for granted like the magnitude of what we're putting on, the event, the show, the everything that we're doing. We're always trying to level up and get better each and every year. Obviously, that comes with trade-offs, like I said, with everything. And some people, sometimes we get it wrong. I'm not gonna lie. Like sometimes we put a speaker on that we probably shouldn't put a speaker on. But if you don't take the risk, you don't get the reward, kind of deal.
Exactly.
So it's kind
Can't
of
be
one of
mad
those
about
things.
that.
But yeah, no, I definitely think like we take it very seriously, and it's like a privilege that like that many people show up to our conferences, like, and we love it, but it's definitely exhausting in the moment. Like, it's nonstop. I'm up at like 5:30, 6 in the morning
Oof.
setting up. And then when everyone leaves the venue at like 6 o'clock 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, we have post conference meeting or post day meeting, and then we got to go out with help with the sponsors and go to the next event or the night event. So it's long days and early mornings basically.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And but yeah, it is huge. If people haven't been to the conferences, go to them, go to whether big or small. Community is the number one thing by far in a survival situation. And I was saying that on the news desk the other day,
Yeah.
when BJ and I and Natalie were up there with Nico. It's the number one thing in a survival situation. We're on Earth, hello, we are we're surviving. We're trying to survive, and the people around you, the network around you, is what's going to get you by. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think that's the most important thing for all of us to remember, especially Bitcoiners, the social layer we have. man, just, thank you for being generous with your time today, brother. I really, really appreciate it. Where can people find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find me on Twitter at Chris Alaimo6. So Chris Alaimo and then the number 6 on Twitter. And on Nostr, you can find me at Chris Alaimo. And then I think I'm at b.tc is my like npub, or the way that you can find it basically, or NIP5 identifier on Nostr. So those are 2 platforms I mainly hang out on, and always happy to chat and hang out. And Brandon, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I love it, brother. And last thing I'll say too, and maybe get a quick thought on this, but like 10 years from now, like I don't think we're gonna have these conferences. So, like the things that you put on, I think that people are gonna look back and be like, wow, like you were a part of that or you did that. Because like you don't have like fiat conferences now. And then people could say like, well, they're business conferences. There's a lot of there, I guess there are technically probably fiat conferences in a way, but we're not gonna have like Bitcoin conferences 10 or 20 years from now because it just is, right? Like Bitcoin
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
the money. Like we're not gonna have, so I think now is the time to like take it all in, build your connections, because these are going to be honestly some of the wealthiest people on earth that you're making friends with and that you're hanging around and have these connections with. And it's not the only reason to do it, obviously, but like understanding that I think is huge. So I'd love your maybe last thought on that of just like this won't exist 10, 15 years. So enjoy it now because it'll never be like this
Yeah,
again.
no, I'll definitely add to that. I mean, I definitely think that like we are in a prime time where, conferences are a thing, but I agree. Like, I do think like in 10 years time, either they'll be non-existent or they'll be much, much smaller in scale. So, kind of enjoy the ride. Maybe in 10 years time, we'll just be hanging out on Sailor's yacht and we'll just be chilling, sipping mimosas and eating shrimp. But yeah, I definitely do think like there's a limited time. So enjoy it while it lasts now for sure. And yeah, just love seeing all the Bitcoiners in the trenches, and always love hanging out with Bitcoiners.
So true, man. Great way to wrap. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Brandon. Have a good one.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Just so blessed, so grateful to have Chris on and to have everyone come on the show, and blessed to know playable characters. We are truly the sum of the 5 people we hang out with most, and really the people we surround ourselves with, maybe the books we surround ourselves with on our shelf. Look good, feel good, play good. At least we have the books around us. Might not read them all, but hey, at least you feel more confident. You feel better, right? I know I feel better. I know I feel smarter having Chris in my sphere, in my circle, being able to talk to him and being able to share his testimony and to put it on game film so that we can see it and we can ponder on it and replay it back and learn from it. It's the most important aspect of any survival situation is community. We all have to remember that. It's a reminder for me first and foremost, and for the rest of us. So I appreciate you. Please share this out. The algorithm hates truth. Thank you, Chris, for coming on. Question everything with boldness, even the existence of God himself. Trust but verify. And this is not financial advice. It is freedom advice. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.